I don't hear any shooting. No shooting at all. Russian tanks haven't rolled into Ukraine. And I wonder, are we being conned? Because last week, of course, US President Joe Biden reportedly told world leaders that Russia could invade Ukraine by yesterday. And Ukraine's president even tweeted that, yes, indeed, we are told that February 16 will be the day of the attack. We will make it instead the day of unity. And on this day, we will hang national flags, wear blue and yellow ribbons, this is Ukraine's colours, and show the world our unity. But that said, Ukraine's president used to be a comedian. He used to star in a comedy about a teacher who, to his shock, became president of Ukraine by ranting to his class about corruption.
Василий Петрович Голобородько? Да. Доброе утро, господин президент.
And early this week, this comedian president of Ukraine said he was actually joking about that invasion this weekend. But who else had been joking? Was Russian President Vladimir Putin joking when he sent 130,000 soldiers to Ukraine's borders and warned of war? Or is he joking now? Now, when his generals have released video that they claim proves that they are now pulling back. Because the boss of the NATO Defence Alliance sure doesn't believe Putin.
We do not see any sign of de-escalation on the ground. No withdrawals of troops or equipment. This may, of course, change. However, what we see today is that Russia maintains a massive invasion force ready to attack.
What on earth is going on? Well, joining me is Dr Robert Horvath of La Trobe University. He's a specialist on Russian politics. In fact, he's a specialist on Putin himself. His books include Putin's Fascists, talking about Putin's use of nationalism. Have we been seeing the biggest game of chicken, or is Vladimir Putin really going to invade Ukraine to stop it from joining the NATO Western Alliance, bringing the West right up to his border?
I think in order to understand what Putin is doing, it's important to look at Russia's internal politics today. Putin is not merely reacting to what's happening on the international stage, he's reacting to a domestic political environment that's extremely difficult for him. And for him, there have been two things that have been really important during the past year or so. The first is the aftermath of the failed assassination of Alexei Navalny, the most important Russian opposition leader. And the second is the expose of Putin's vast wealth in the documentary that Navalny produced, which has now been watched over 220 million times. It's the most viewed
That's amazing.
video on Russian YouTube. There's nearly one view for every Russian citizen. And for an authoritarian leader, this is a problem. The subject has become him. The subject became Putin's personal criminality. And Putin's standard way of dealing with this kind of problem, his standard way of rebutting criticism about his authoritarianism, about his human rights abuses, is to shift the subject and is to provoke tension with the West. His standard justification for human rights abuses is that the people he's arresting, the people he's putting in prison, they are pawns of the West. They are pawns of foreign enemies. He's telling his own people, I'm arresting my own people because they are pawns of enemies. And so I'm protecting you by arresting people and sending them to labor camps. And it's important to understand what is taking place on the Ukrainian border as deeply connected to that process, deeply connected to Russia's
would he actually go and invade Ukraine just to get? But would he actually invade Ukraine to fulfil this aim to try to get people to stop talking about what a criminal and a thug and a murderer and a thief he is?
Mm-hmm. Some kind of military action is certainly possible. I would be very surprised if he unleashed a full-scale war aimed at occupying Kyiv and imposing a Kremlin-backed government. There certainly are things that he could do that would be less risky for his personal survival. And it's important to understand there are some clear signs of military unease about the prospect of war with Ukraine. Firstly, because many members of the Russian military are patriots who understand that Russia and Ukraine are kindred peoples, and that a massive war against Ukraine would do historic damage, not only to Ukraine, but also to Russia's long-term national interests. And there are also others who understand that it's far from clear that it would be an easy victory. The Ukrainians clearly would fight. The Ukrainian army is far better prepared and trained and equipped than it was in 2014 when Russia faced a Ukrainian security apparatus that was disrupted by the revolution that had just taken place in Kyiv. I think a full-scale invasion involving the occupation of Kyiv is unlikely, but it's nevertheless important to understand that Putin is becoming less predictable, he's becoming older, he's becoming more paranoid, he's more isolated. His position on the world stage is shakier. He's someone who has lied so much that there's very little trust of him. No Western leader would say, as George W. Bush said in 2003, that he had looked into Putin's soul and seen what he liked. So it's
is that among all the things that Bush said, that had to be about the most stupid. Look, your insights are absolutely fascinating. I don't think we've heard that kind of pitch put to us, that how strong that the domestic motivation really is. I really appreciate your time, Dr. Horvath. Thank you so much indeed.
Thank you very much.